You have seen it? The film?
I did watch it. So it was a Twitter premiere somehow, right? I think they premiered it on Twitter. It's like
I don't think it was a Twitter premiere. I think it was announced on Twitter and it was a Rumble premiere, but that doesn't really matter. It premiered somewhere this week. You and I have both seen it. I will tell you, I was watching on my phone, and I was trying to get out of a mode in which you saw all of the comments scrolling through, and I hit a button that I did not realize was retweet. And the next comment I saw was, Bret Weinstein has retweeted this. So I immediately deleted that tweet. But anybody who saw it because they have an alert targeted at me or because of the vagaries of Twitter, don't take that as any indication of anything. It was not intentional, and you can tell that because I deleted it within seconds. But I did want to give some guidance on how to think about this thing. I had a conclusion. You and I have not talked about what your conclusion might be.
So just, for those... It's called Died Suddenly, and it's about the effects that the filmmakers purport to see from a variety of sources of the widespread adoption of the COVID vaccines.
Right. Now, I am alarmed about this documentary, I would say, at 2 levels of alarm. One, I believe it contains something potentially very, very important, and it has fused that something to things that make it suspect.
Yeah.
The thing that I think is very important, and I'm not saying that this is true, but I'm saying it would be so easy to falsify if it wasn't true, that if we can't falsify it, that's going to tell us something. That is a kind of piece of information. The thing that it brings to light that one needs to take seriously is the possibility that morticians are seeing in cadavers a novel kind of what is being described as a clot, but it's not really a clot.
White fibrous,
extremely large artery and vein blocking masses. You might call them plaques. But in any case, the idea, the basic...
But that have internal coherence and so can be pulled out of a cadaver.
Right, and they apparently have...
And not just the veins, but the arteries, which is odd.
The consistency of rubber bands or calamari is how they're being described. Now, the first place I encountered this was Steven Crowder interviewed one of the same morticians who was talking about his observation and alarm and his talk with other morticians. And what I would say is, this film, made by a guy named Stu, S-T-E-W Peters, is it?
That's right. He's at least one of the producers. Yeah.
Right, who I don't follow. I don't even really recognize him, except that there was an earlier thing where he was involved in advancing a story about snake venom and the vaccines that turned out to be nonsense. A story that we also didn't back or believe in. In any case, the mortician reports these calamari-like clots. There's lots of footage of them, not only preserved in vials, but in this film, there's footage of them being pulled from cadavers. Could that be faked? Of course it could be faked. On the other hand, it raises a relatively obvious question. Are there morticians who are not seeing this, who will come forward and saying, yeah, I'm not seeing it in my mortuary? Right? There ought to be lots of those if this is fake. And what I will tell you is that people that I don't know well, but that I'm in conversation with, have friends in the so-called death care industry who validate the story that these things exist. So if these things exist, and the timing of them is what it appears to be, which is to say, not consistent with it being a COVID phenomenon, yes, consistent with it being a post-vaccine phenomenon, then it needs to be investigated. It is utterly unambiguous that this is an important question. And the problem is that this film overtly almost fuses it to utter nonsense, right? It fuses it. There's like a montage in the beginning with Bigfoot and 9/11 stuff, and I can't remember what else, but it was like a smorgasbord. I don't know how you pronounce that. Smorgasbord?
I think only if you're the chef in the Muppets do you pronounce it that way.
I am not. But in any case, it fuses it to these other things. And
so I read that as there's lots of kooky ideas out there, and some of them turn out to be true.
Right.
with them not. I read that opening montage generously, perhaps too generously, as we, the makers of this film, may or may not believe in the, conspiracy theories that you will associate with footage of 9/11, of Sasquatch, of the moon landing, of this, that, the other, but, the Kennedy assassination. And let me just, add that one in there because, Kennedy assassination, which is one that I think a large proportion of Americans are like, yeah, that one.
Yes, especially Americans with brains. Yeah.
Right.
So, yeah, I would say actually...
Let me just add one in there where I'm comfortable saying, yeah, that is not what the Warren Commission said it was.
Right.
Right.
My point would be, unfortunately, I think your mind is playing a trick on you where it is rationalizing away an unforgivable connection, right? If this calamari clot thing is for real, then it needs to exist on its own so that we can figure out what it implies about the rest of our models of this thing that we didn't know yet. To in any way bring it close to anything preposterous like Bigfoot, which I would rate the likelihood of Bigfoot being real in the Pacific Northwest as extremely unlikely, just in light of the fact that we never find skulls or skeletons or get a good picture or whatever, and we know that people have hoaxed, and so...
I mean, you're now in it because you're now going to get the Bigfoot community coming after us. But luckily, it doesn't include any actual Bigfoot, so...
Yeah, exactly. I'd be more concerned.
Yeah.
But anyway, point being, unforgivable to fuse those things.
Yep.
Also unforgivable to take incredibly important sources like Peter McCullough, Ryan Cole, Steve Kirsch, to have these people in a film in which low-quality stuff, garbage stuff, and this very important observation...
Yeah, so there's a few errors.
Yep.
Right, like we haven't, I don't even remember what it is that they're showing, but they're talking about some very unlikely events that have actually happened.
Yeah.
And 3 times in a row, they're like, the probability is 0. And I was actually yelling at my computer, like, no, don't do that. Right? Like,
no,
the probability cannot be 0 of the thing that happened.
Right. They basically are making an argument, a correct argument, about the number of standard deviations out we are, and therefore how unlikely this is. And then they're basically rounding to 0. Right. And it's mathematical.
You don't round to 0.
In fact, it's exactly the subject of this episode of Dark Horse that we've been talking about. The point is, you can have a very, very low probability, and it's not the same thing as 0. Yeah. But anyway, so what I'm going to...
I still think I have knees, though.
Not if this is a simulation, you don't.
I mean, I think the simulation of me in the simulation thinks I have knees.
Oh, yeah.
That was too many simulations, but then that would happen.
Let's agree that you either have knees or simulated knees, but... no, it's really 3. It's knees, simulated knees, or imaginary knees. I mean, you could be a schizophrenic quadriplegic who thinks they have knees.
I mean, quadriplegics still have knees. They just don't work.
Oh, amputee, double amputee.
Yeah,
right.
Thanks.
Sorry. I'm just trying to be complete about the various hypotheses here. Believe me, the one I believe in is the one that you have knees.
Functioning. Yes.
Yes. But anyway, my advice to our audience was going to be, actually, as much as I would like to tell you, don't watch this film because we don't know what it is. The clot stuff, the pseudo-clot, whatever these structures are, rubber band, calamari, whatever it is, watch it. Evaluate for yourself. What are the chances that these morticians, it's not an infinite number of morticians in this piece, what are the chances that they are not what they appear, that they're a plant, placed to convince us that these structures are real and that it will turn out not to be true because every other mortician in the Western world is going to stand up and tell us, hey, wait a second, I haven't seen one of these things, right? What are the chances? And don't those chances drop every day that the morticians don't rise up and denounce this film saying, hey, those things aren't real, right? So anyway, I would say watch the film. Do not let the film color your view of Ryan Cole, of Steve Kirsch, of Peter McCullough. Process these things independently. And the film could be malicious nonsense designed to take this very important and effectively incontrovertible piece of evidence and get rid of it by muddling it. It could be that. Process it separately. Process the observations, the interviews, go back and look at Steven Crowder's interview, and then watch what develops in the coming weeks. Is this being used to get rid of that evidence by saying, oh, it's part of some giant conspiracy theory that involves Bigfoot and 9/11 and who knows? Don't do that, right? Process the information that these morticians seem to be giving you independently and leave the rest of the film out because it's not clear even what it is. That's my advice.